Hi, everyone. Thank you for connecting with us on The Pursuit. As a reminder, if you're blessed by this, share this, hit the subscribe button. But remember, our goal in this podcast is to encourage you, to strengthen you, and then most certainly to give you resources as you pursue your God-given call and your purpose. And so today we're blessed, as we always are, with a guest from time to time. But today, very special guest, Dr. David Bernard, the General Superintendent of the United Pentecostal Church International, of whom I'm licensed with. I'm an ordained minister. And so, Brother Bernard, we're so grateful to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's great to be back here today.
Well, it is always a treat to have you come and minister at Parkway, and we're looking forward to that. But today, our goal is we just want to ask some questions, have a conversation with you, and prayerfully be a blessing to the people on the podcast. So let me start with this. Looking back over the expanse of your life, being where you are, an accomplished author, having been a pastor, really a leader of leaders, a mentor of leaders, you may not remember this, but many years ago, as a young man, just getting into the ministry, I sent you an email, and you were freshly elected as the General Superintendent, and I never expected a response, and you responded, carried on number of emails with me, and that forever impacted me. That's who you are, and I appreciate that about you. So looking over that expanse, if you were to talk to your younger self, what are some of the things you would say, give heed to, pay attention, make sure you have in your life, don't forget about? What would some of those be?
Well, that's a challenging question, and I'll first start by saying I had the privilege of being raised in a Christian apostolic home. My parents were both credentialed ministers for over 50 years, and I grew up in first home missions and then global missions. Mm-hmm. So that shaped my life. So I had a lot of advantages. So thankfully, I give credit, of course, to God, His grace, and the influence of my parents that I can't look back and say I took such a horrible turn that it destroyed my life or set me back. But, of course, you always learn as you grow. And some of the things I've learned, if you would say what are some mistakes I've made, or at least what I would do differently or what I could do better, one thing I've learned is you have to learn when to let go. You have to learn when to say no. You have to learn when to put things in the hands of God. And what I mean by that is, as a pastor, for example, or some other spiritual leader, you have a desire to help people. You have a love for people. You don't want to see them drift away. And so part of that may be a God-given desire. Part of it may be an ego that you don't want to lose somebody because you want to win.
Right.
But so what I've tried to, one of my life mottos is, if you're going to make a mistake, if you're going to err on the side of mercy. So I try to give people a second chance. I try to, be patient with people. If they say they want to do the right thing, I try to find a way to help them. But I've learned sometimes that can be counterproductive for them. And also, if they're in leadership, sometimes you might be thinking you're helping them, but you're hurting a lot of other people because you're allowing something to go on too long. So I've learned sometimes you have to know when to let go, know when to say no, know when to give up. I mean, you can always continue praying for people, but you can't always work with a situation if the people are not responding.
Right.
So that's one lesson, maybe among many, that I've learned.
That's a good one.
And also you have to set boundaries for your life. You have to have balance. You can't do everything, and you have to focus on your priorities. And that, again, means saying no to some things that are not your top priorities. Mm-hmm. So you learn what to invest in and try to divest your ego from what is a win or trying to make something into a win, and focus more on what's the will of God and what's the best for the group that I'm responsible for.
Yeah. So you said something right there at the end that I think is so important for whether you're in leadership, and there's part of me that says no matter who you are, you're in some position of leadership, because wherever you are, you have influence,
Yes.
right? And so I think so many of us hesitate to give up on anything because it could be our culture, what you
Yes.
referred to, our ego, the competitive nature of our society. But trying to navigate, is this my ego, or is this something God's really calling me to? I got to step away and put that in God's hand. How, and this is probably a really difficult question, how do you discern that, especially when it involves another individual?
Yes. Well, I think certainly prayer, and it is a balance. It is tough because we're capable as humans of having mixed motives and thinking the best of ourselves and not really examining ourselves. So if I'm trying to help a person who's going astray, you want to have compassion. You want to have empathy. You never want to be hard-hearted and callous and say, well, they're not interested, just I don't care about them.
Right.
You still have to care.
Right.
So I think you still pray, but on the other hand, you do have to be objective as much as possible in your evaluation. Am I actually helping this person?
Right.
Or is it really enabling them to continue dysfunction? And am I neglecting other people who are being affected? So one way, of course, prayer, asking God to help you. If you remember, in the Bible, the Lord told Samuel, stop praying for Saul.
Right.
There's a
Right.
time, it's already, what's done is done. And I'm not saying we should ever stop praying for a soul, but, Samuel was grieving, wanting Saul to be a success again. And
Right.
God said, no, the time is
Done.
past. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen. Another thing I've found as a leader, and you're right, really every mature Christian is a leader in some way. You're leading your family, you're leading newer converts,
Right.
You have a position of ministry. When I say ministry, service in the church, and so you're leading somebody. Everybody's a leader and everybody's a follower.
Right.
So we have to learn how to do both well. But one, of course, in my case, my wife has been a very great balance for me. So here I am, and I'll give you an example as a pastor. I might come home and tell my wife, I met with such and such a family. They're upset about this, and they're angry, but they do have a valid point. So I've tried to work with them. I've tried to reassure them. We're going to be meeting again, and I'm going to try to explain to them I'm dealing with the situation that they're so concerned about, and I want them to keep doing their part. And she'd listen to all that, and she'd say, I'm praying those people out. I say, what do you mean? She said, I'm praying they leave. I say, wait a minute, you're canceling out my prayers. Here I am praying to keep them, and you're praying for them to leave. You're going against me. She says, look, they don't share your vision. They don't share the vision of the church. They're not committed. It's best for them, and it's best for the church if they go wherever they're going to be committed. So don't keep endlessly trying to persuade them. It's time just to put them in the hands of God. Right. And so that helps give balance because she would be someone who's my partner, who has the same desire for the church and the same love for those people as I do.
Correct.
Same end goal, but she can look at it from a different perspective.
Correct.
Saying you're trying too hard, and it's time to let God do something. And we've had in some of those cases, we've had people leave, and then later they would come back with a very different attitude. They learned some things, and now they realize how much they love the church, and there's a happy ending sometimes.
Right.
But it probably wouldn't have happened had I not allowed that process to go forward.
Yeah. As soon as you started to refer to that situation, it immediately reminded me of something. And it's not so much something that I have forgotten, but it's something I'll never forget about you and your influence, your impact in my life and my ministry. There was a moment where I was in a very low place as a pastor, and I remember you sitting in my truck, and you said to me, I learned something about you today, Brother Peters. And I was so frustrated, and I responded with, what, that I'm the worst pastor in the fellowship? And you said, no, you're a man of patience. but, and you told me that very kind.
Same
You told
kind
me
of-
the
yes.
story really, and I said, your wife sounds like Melissa, and you reached over and you said, then Tim, I would suggest you start listening to your wife more. And it's in those moments, though.
Yes.
It's, to make it feel less painful when I say, well, maybe it's my ego that I'm trying so hard. It's the Messiah complex. I think I can help everybody.
Right.
But there are times, to your point, we can't. And we have to be okay with the hurt of separation.
Yes.
Hopeful that maybe they'll come back. But if they don't, we want them to rise. And so we don't hate them, etc. But they're not seeing the same things at the same time.
And that's true not only of pastors, but every leader, every mature saint. All of us should be involved in evangelism and discipleship.
Right.
So let's say you're a faithful member of a local church. Well, very possibly you're discipling someone who's new. But every once in a while, some of those people go a different direction, and you feel hurt. What could I have done different? It's my fault. Or you grieve, and you should grieve because you should never become callous. If you love, you have to be vulnerable, and you have to be willing to accept that. But it's okay. I mean, we should do everything we can. We should examine ourselves. What could I say or do different, or what could I learn? But sometimes what you learn is, well, people make their own decisions, and you have to put them in God's hands.
Right. And I think that's so good for all of us, no matter whether you're pastoring, if you're leading a small group, if you're teaching a home Bible study. There are times that I know, having taught home Bible studies, you get somebody and they are never going to take the next step.
Yeah.
But they will continue to expense the time because they like hanging out.
Right.
And at some point, there has to be a break or a decision.
Right.
So that you can continue to move forward. And so I think that's so good. Let me shift just a little bit, and maybe not a hard pivot, but when you're a busy man, and I'm grateful to even have you here, but I know that you came from a district conference, and you're going to leave here and you're going to go somewhere else, and your time is spoken for. It's allotted for a lot of things. But just because you're busy, that does not negate your need for personal, intimate time, refreshing with the Lord. Talk to me about maybe not so much even your rhythms of what you do with the Lord, but remind us of, one, the value, but maybe make some suggestions. What are some things we could do in our everyday lives to just continue that intimate pursuit of the Lord?
Yes. Well, when I was a pastor, I was able to control my schedule more. So I had a more rigid or more definite plan. In my present role, I'm traveling. Every week is a different week. Every day is a different day. So I've learned through seasons of life, you have to reinvent yourself. So what works at one point doesn't always work at the next point, because life changes. If you have a young family versus if you have an empty nest, and so forth, or different roles of life. So you never get to the point where you're an expert. You periodically have to reevaluate and say, is what I'm doing really productive? Has it become just a routine, or am I neglecting my spiritual disciplines? So you have to reevaluate yourself. So just because I'm the general superintendent doesn't mean I don't need to reevaluate myself and make sure I'm diligent and on track. But several, and there's nothing I'm going to say is going to be surprising, but obviously prayer is your relationship with God, your daily prayer. And it's not so much about time as it's about relationship, just like with a human relationship. You can't just schedule 30 minutes with your wife and have intense quality time. It has to be organic. However, you have to have both quality and quantity. So let's say you're super busy, you got kids at home, and you sit down and say, okay, I've got 15 minutes. That's all I have with you. This has to be high quality. So what happened at school? Tell me this, tell me that. Kids aren't going to cooperate like that. They're going to say nothing happened.
Right.
So you have to create times you're spending enough time doing things together, such as eating dinner or playing games or doing something, and out of the blue, they will come up with something important or profound or meaningful, and you'll have that quality time. But you just can't make it happen.
Right.
You have to spend enough time with them that it spontaneously happens. So using that analogy, it's not so much about if I clock in so many hours of prayer, God has to do certain things. If I clock in so many days of fasting, God has to do certain things. It's not a point system. It's not earning favors. It's not works righteousness. It's not legalism. But it's relationship. So my goal is, let's spend time in prayer every day. And probably the best way to do that is to set a time that works in your schedule. For me, the morning is the best time. But since every day is different, what may happen is I may pray at home. I may pray as I commute, driving to the office, or maybe sitting on a plane, flying somewhere. Now, if you are doing something else like that, that shouldn't be your only prayer time.
Right.
But still, you can have meaningful prayer time. Or it may be after I get to the office, or it may be all three, or it may be I like to stay up late at night, and so if I'm up late, it's too late to have interaction with the family, it's too late to make phone calls, I may have some quiet time of reading. Well, that's also a good time for meditation and prayer.
Right.
One thing I did as a young minister, we were challenged to pray an hour a day, and I wasn't doing that, and I don't necessarily do that today, but I wanted to make a commitment for 1 year, 5 days a week on average. So I built in flexibility. So if one day I prayed 20 minutes, I knew later in the week I would pray more.
Right.
And I kept a calendar where I recorded it. And that became a breakthrough for me because I was able to pray more intentionally. And so prayer didn't become as difficult of a struggle, and I didn't necessarily keep the time in the future, in later years, but it helped me break through a dimension and also some flexibility. So we want to pray every day, but it's very likely that 1 or 2 days a week your schedule is going to be blown away by circumstances beyond your control. Then you feel guilty,
Right.
and then you give up. You know, it's like a New Year's resolution.
Yeah.
You do it fine for a month, you mess up for a few days, and then you just quit. So build in some flexibility. So I want to pray every day, at least have a conversation with God. But if I can get 5 days a week of my schedule time of prayer,
Correct.
then it's not 100% success, but it's 80% of success. It's a passing grade. So
Right.
it's not a failure. In other words,
Right,
don't feel
right.
guilty. But also the Bible talks about praying without ceasing. So it's not just a structure of I'm setting aside 15 minutes or I'm setting aside 30 minutes or what have you, but it's throughout the day communing with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Something amazing happens, you praise the Lord. Something terrible happens, you pray. You know, and so it becomes an ongoing conversation.
Right. Right.
The next thing, of course, is the Bible. I have a goal of reading the Bible through every year, and many times I will choose a different translation. So I've probably read completely through at least 10 translations and used a number of others. But that's to try to keep it fresh, so that when I'm reading the same words, I don't just get in a rut of, well, I already know what this means, so to speak. The different words force me to look at it afresh. And sometimes I'm startled, and I'll go back to the King James or New King James says, does that really say that?
Right.
And most of the time, yes, it really does, but I'd never thought of it in that light. And so reading the Bible, I try to schedule times. And sometimes it's a matter of just reading a few verses a day. But sometimes I like to read the whole book in one setting, because you get a perspective of the context when you do that. Of course, faithful church attendance to your home church, tithing and offerings, I think those are spiritual disciplines. Fasting, I like to fast 1 day a week. With my current schedule, I probably only do that half the time because of events and schedules. But the way I would typically, I would choose 1 day a week, and I would eat supper and then not eat after supper until the next supper. So it's approximately 24 hours. But if you're conducting a busy schedule, it doesn't inhibit you from, having the strength and stamina to do that. I would drink water only during that time. And again, it's not a matter of earning favors with God or getting better, but it is a matter of self-discipline And sometimes you might take 2 or 3 days of fasting. It would be a way of saying, I want to draw closer to God, and maybe there's a specific need. I'm earnestly seeking God for direction. So I want to make sure that I'm telling myself as well as God, this is my priority.
Right.
So those are some of the spiritual disciplines I think that all of us could participate in. So I think you need a goal, and I think you need a schedule, but I think you need some flexibility.
I love you emphasizing the flexibility, because you are absolutely right. So many of the people that I have the privilege of being in their lives and helping them establish routines, knowing from my own experience, how many times have you started the bread chart and got a month in, 2 months in, and got behind, and it just seemed so overwhelming, you just gave up instead of just continuing where you left off, and realizing that life has a way of blowing up on you, and then everything that you were so rigid with, now you can't. And people do, they mean well, they want to do well, and we're our own worst critic, but we're our own worst grace giver too.
Yes.
And so in those moments, we just throw up our hands. I'll never be able to do this. And so you mentioning flexibility so many times, I love that, because if people would understand, just start again, just keep going, just pick it up again. And I think it comes back to SMART goals, right? Be specific, make them measurable, make them attainable, realistic, and then time-based. But don't set a goal that's so easy that you can do it without trying. And don't set a goal that's so over the top that there's no possibility of actually doing it. So,
and one thing I found to help with prayer, I like to use the Lord's Prayer as a template. It's got 6 parts.
Absolutely.
And those 6 parts can cover just about anything you could imagine praying for, from praise and worship to your needs. So if you assigned 5 minutes to each one, that's right there 30 minutes without even trying.
Right.
So that will help you, because sometimes people mean well, but after 5 minutes, they run out of things to say. They're staring at the clock, and it's not about the clock.
Correct.
But having a little scheme or a little outline can help you.
Cheat sheet, so to speak. Yeah. So I also tell people to use the Tabernacle Plan. I think Tabernacle Plan is another good one.
Right.
And so I'm with you. I think having some sort of method, having a guide, a cheat sheet to be able to guide you through whatever the amount of time is. My sons both played basketball, and when one part of your game is not functioning correctly, you always go back to the fundamentals, right? And so I think even in our spiritual disciplines, to your point, when you find that life has happened, whatever the case might be, go back to the fundamentals and say, okay, why am I doing this? Remind yourself it's not performance-based, and now begin to just pick it up and continue to do it. And so I love that. So thank you for that. Let me ask you a question about personal ministry, family, marriage. I'm privileged. A number of the people that I pastor and lead are young in their marriage. They have little kids. How did you, as a young dad, how did you protect your family and your marriage while still leading at a high level?
One key word is balance. Another key word is, we've already discussed when I use the analogy of our relationship with God, is time, both quantity and quality. And also, much like I just described in our personal spiritual disciplines, you've got to set some goals. So you have to have a schedule. So what my wife and I did is, first of all, by default, we would have the evening meal together. And even though I was busy, sometimes out of town, but almost every night it was a routine, and no media, no phones. If there are other extracurricular activities, we tried to plan so that the whole family would be in the same room, not or not
Right.
just in different chairs watching different media, but at the table and meaningful discussion. And that just is a set pattern. Also, one night a week we made family night. So when our kids were at home, so Monday night was family night. And as a pastor, I made sure we did not schedule anything with the church unless it was a family-oriented event that the whole family could participate in.
Okay.
So that way the families of the church knew, we can schedule something and the pastor's not going to pull a mandatory meeting on us.
Right.
But what we would do is we did different things, but maybe we'd go out to dinner, maybe we'd have a picnic, maybe we'd go bowling, maybe we'd play board games, whatever the kids wanted to do. But we'd also have a family devotion. So we would have a simple devotion where we went around the room. We would usually start with prayer requests from the oldest to the youngest. We would do testimonies. Everyone, one testimony, one thing you're thankful for. Especially when the kids were younger, I would read a simple verse in the Bible and usually have a little devotional book. UPCI had, over the years, put out different things, a little Bible story, a little contemporary story. We'd talk about it. Nothing really intense, not like a church service, but just emphasizing the participation of the kids, especially. And so that became so we did that once a week. But then my wife and I would also sit down with our calendar since we were so busy, and we would plan things in our calendar. And the reason for that was when I would get an urgent call, I need to meet with you tonight, Pastor, or whatever. I would say, well, let me check my calendar. And I would come back and say, well, I'm sorry, I have an appointment at that time. However, I'll give you another time, or can you wait one more day? I wouldn't have to say I'm going on a date with my wife.
Yeah.
But we would sit down and we would schedule date nights. We would schedule family. In addition to our regular family night, we would schedule like a Saturday going on a day trip, or during the summer doing something special. We did have an annual family vacation. I learned it needed to be over a weekend, or otherwise I'm not really taking a vacation in my holidays became very important times. We created our own family traditions. So, and then I would also schedule sometimes where I would just take the kids, just me and the kids. Or sometimes, especially as the kids started getting older, just me and one of the kids. So we have 3 children. They're all grown, married. They're all in church and ministry. They all have kids. We have 8 grandkids. But I love to play racquetball. I'd take all 3 kids with me to play racquetball. Or I would take one kid out to lunch and just sit down and talk about things. So they naturally would usually have more time with their mother, so I had to be more intentional to make sure not only family time as a whole, but time with me as a dad. So we put all those kind of things in the calendar. And so that over the month and over the year, we tried to build in a quality but also quantity of family time.
That's so good. I love that. Looking at how busy our world is, and, I'm sitting here holding my phone in my hand looking at my notes. It's not uncommon to go out to a restaurant, and it could be your family, but we'll say it's a different family, and you'll see, to your point, everybody sitting at the table, eating a meal, nobody's talking, and they're all looking at their device. Obviously, that's problematic. It is becoming very normalized. And so to have you even talking about the intentionality of making those times where there was no phones, no media, no distractions, I think so many of us would do well to incorporate that into our own everyday lives as well, even with our spouse.
Yes. So I think dinner's a great time just to ban the phones from the table, and if somebody calls, just let them leave a message. I know for our big family events, even now, like for holidays, Thanksgiving, my wife, half jokingly, she will come around with a box and she'll collect everybody's phones and she'll put it in the bedroom and say, until we're finished, there's no access. And even today, with all our kids being adults, one of our favorite things is when we all get together, we since we all live in different states, and of course they have in-laws, so what we've developed a tradition is 1 year they all come for Christmas to our permanent home. The other year they all come for Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. So at least once a year we're going to be together, all of us, kids, grandkids, and we'll help pay for the transportation. We'll invest in that. Mm-hmm. But then the alternate years they're free to be with the other family. And of course, that doesn't have to be the only time we get together. We also have a tradition. We had a tradition of a family vacation. So each year, my wife and I plan something, and we invite the kids if they want to come. Let us know, and we'll try to see. Yeah. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And we also have a tradition of Grandkids Week. So 1 week, all the grandkids come to our house, and we take care of them. Sometimes the parents come too when the kids are real small, but this becomes their time for a built-in week of babysitting, so they can go do what they want to do every day or for the whole week.
Right.
So that's been very meaningful to plan those times. But one of the favorite things when we do get together is a family powwow. So we sit down, and after the little kids have gone to bed, and we just go one by one. Give us your update. What's going on with your family? What's going on with your ministry? What's going on in the church? The pros and cons. What can we pray for? And I'll give, we call it kind of the state of the family address.
I love it.
Because we all live such busy lives. We're all involved in ministry. All three of my kids are pastoring. So we have that commonality but we can't always speak to each other on a weekly basis. Right. At least they may interact with my wife and me, but all the kids don't have that opportunity to interact with each other.
Yeah.
And then as the grandkids get older, we start involving them. So we're trying to create a family dynamic where we're going to back each other up. We're going to pray for each other. We're there for you. If you need us, pick up the phone or text us, and we're here for you.
I just absolutely love that. So talking about the next generation, when we look at the apostolic movement, the leaders of the next generation, should the Lord tarry, what would you say to that generation that we understand methodology changes, our message is the same, but if there was something that the next gen has to be thinking about that is going to, in what you see from your vantage point, that is going to, maybe there's something that we're going to have to think about differently. What are those things that you'd be saying, hey, we need to pay attention to?
Well, if you want me to talk to the next generation, I will also have an aside to say to my generation. I'm 68. We have to release these younger people. Of course, when you get my age, a lot of times anybody that's under 50 is young, or under 40 is young, and we have to learn to release. But to speak directly to those who are 40 and under, for example, I would say we need to maintain the apostolic message, the apostolic identity. So we're always going to have to struggle for that, or reaffirm that, or reassure, or dig it out for ourselves. Do the hard work of what do you believe and why do you believe it, and reaffirm that. But having said that, I think we have to consider ourselves to be missionaries to our generation. So we're living in a post-Christian, postmodern world. So what previous generations took for granted. So, for example, even teaching a Bible study, in many cases we took for granted that person would believe in the Bible. So all we have to do is show them what the Bible says, and we got it. We can't necessarily take that for granted anymore.
Right.
Now, as Pentecostals, we're not at a disadvantage because we have both the Word and the Spirit. So even if somebody is not convinced the Bible is true, we have our personal testimony. We have the Holy Spirit. People enter into our home or our service, and they feel something they never felt before. And we can say, well, that's because it's in the Bible. So we can lead them back to the Bible. But unlike many groups that are Bible-based only, we're not at a disadvantage in a postmodern culture. But we do have to understand that's the culture we're in. And, of course, when I say postmodern, what that basically means is everything is relative. There is no absolute truth.
Right.
So anytime you appeal to truth, it's suspect. But there again, in a postmodern culture, your personal experience is privileged above all. Well, we have experiences of healing, deliverance, salvation, Holy Spirit. So we can speak in very real ways. But my point is, going back to your question, in a sense, we have to consider ourselves to be missionaries to our culture. So if you were appointed as a missionary to China, for example, you would expect to preach in Chinese or use an interpreter. You would expect if there's dinner after church, it's going to probably be Chinese food, not what you expect here in the Midwest. You're going to expect that while we're going to teach modesty of dress according to the Bible, they're going to dress in Chinese fashions and Chinese culture. They're not going to be wearing a suit and tie, for example.
Right.
Well, you would expect that because you're a missionary to China. Well, actually, if you're raised in the United Pentecostal Church or the Apostolic Movement or even a Christian-based church, you're a minority in America.
Right.
And so you have to consider yourself, I am a missionary to my culture. So it doesn't mean I compromise my message, but I have to be willing to change methods. I have to be willing to speak their language instead of making them speak my language.
Right.
I have to find out what their questions are and try to respond to that. I have to see what are the obstacles to their having faith and be willing in my preaching, teaching, or one-on-one conversation. I can't just we're always going to be biblical, but we just can't look at what was effective 50 years ago. We have to know what questions are in people's minds today.
So good.
So that means we have to be engaged in our culture. We have to do some reading and observation of current events, of science and philosophy and psychology, or at least what's going on a popular level in the culture in order to be relevant. And so being relevant doesn't mean compromising truth, but it's trying to meet people where they are. Instead of making them come where you are and learn your language in order to be converted, we have to go where they are and speak their language in order to convert them. So that's what I would say is be a missionary to your culture. So that means I consider myself conservative in doctrine and holiness, but I don't consider myself traditional. So, we have Pentecostal traditions, which are good, and I'm not saying just to casually discard them. Before you make a change, ask yourself, why have we done what we've done? Sometimes there's a good reason for it. But we do have to be willing to change traditions. We do have to be willing to change methods. And we do have to be willing to give Christian liberty in the sense of if one church it doesn't want to change some things, that's fine, but they should feel the same way about a church that does. So things like music and preaching style and the way we conduct church, that can be different based on the culture, generation. So we have to be open to those things while remaining firmly apostolic in our identity.
Right. So the word that keeps coming back to me as you're talking is really something you even talked about, disciplines, and it's flexibility.
Yes.
We have to be flexible because even being within, if you will, the American culture, the geographical placement of where you are also has impact on that as well, right? So I love, again, you emphasizing the importance and the non-negotiables of our message and really the fundamental doctrines of who we are, but realizing that there are some things, it not only is it okay to have the conversation of do we need to make an adjustment, but we have to be very careful that we're not so rigid in that we don't allow flexibility for our neighbor either.
Yes,
and so I'm thankful to hear that. When you look at a leader like myself, or a leader that may not be a pastor, but they're leading in a ministry, what would you say and maybe this is for every leader, maybe it's for every individual, what are some of the common blind spots that a leader might encounter? What are the things that I should be watching out for? Maybe I should be more accountable to somebody else that they're watching out for those.
Well, let me turn it around and speak on the positive side, and it will cover it. But I think one important thing is servant leadership. So a leader can too easily get involved with, we must accomplish this, we must accomplish that, and maybe unintentionally kind of driving people, or maybe even becoming a little authoritarian because, well, I've got to be a good leader, and my followers need to do what is right, and I know what's right, and I need to tell them. But I think we have to, so that could be a blind spot, that being a leader, a spiritual leader, is more about being a servant.
Right.
Now, there is true spiritual authority, and if you're a pastor or in any other position of leadership, yes, there are times to say, here's what's right scripturally, you should believe it. Here's what's right in your life, you should practice it. But it's more about being a servant of people, and Jesus said that in the world, leaders are known by the power they wield,
right.
But in the church, it should be by being a servant.
Right.
And I say this not in any way suggesting manipulation, but in a very sincere way, that as you serve people, that will build influence, and you'll become a more effective leader. You will actually be able to accomplish more of guiding them in what they should do.
Right.
But it's not from an authoritarian point of view, it's from a servant's point of view. So that's one thing I would say is the danger of authoritarianism or dictatorial control, sometimes from the best of motives of,
absolutely,
I've got this job to do, and people need to.
I'm going to be accountable.
Yes,
bless God.
and so there's an element of truth to that.
Right.
But I think we need to come from a servant's heart. And so leadership is more about influence than about exerting authority. You will have authority, but it should be based on influence. Second thing is solo leadership versus team leadership. So a blind spot could be, again, it's my job, I need to do it. I can do it better than anyone else, so I can't let somebody else do it. And maybe some people in a local church, they feel accountable, say, to the pastor. Well, the pastor expects me to do it, so I've got to do it.
Yeah, right.
And I think what we need to, at every level of leadership, including the pastor, we have to be thinking of, I need to build a team to do the job.
Yes.
It's not about me personally doing the job. It's about me leading a team that can effectively do the job. So I look at Ephesians 4:11-12, which talks about the fivefold ministry. I think the fivefold ministries, pastors, teachers, the whole range of ministries, they become a team that's larger than the local church.
Right.
And I think the pastor of the local church is the gatekeeper, but the pastor invites other leaders and participates in events beyond the local church. So there is a ministerial team that we call the fivefold ministry that ministers to the body. But then their job is to equip the saints. Their job is not to do all the work. Their job is to equip the saints so the saints can do the work of ministry.
Right.
And as a result, the body of Christ grows. So that means there needs to be a team within the local church that is being trained. And that's the priesthood of believers, that every believer is a priest unto God.
Right.
If you want to look at the Old Testament example, the preachers are not the New Testament equivalent of the priest. The believers are the equivalent of the New Testament priest. We can all go to God for ourselves, and we can all intercede for others.
Right.
We all have that role. So I think instead of solo leadership, team leadership, investing more in the team, learning to delegate. So initially, it might actually be true that nobody can do the job like we can. But in the long run, that's an indictment on the leader. Why not? Well, you're not training, you're not investing, you're not giving other people a chance. And of course, the other reason why we don't delegate is maybe someone can do the job as well as we can.
Or better.
Or better. And that's where we have to be comfortable in our own calling, our own gifts, our own uniqueness, and say, no, my part is vital. I'm a leader, and the vision that I cast and the guidance I give is absolutely critical, but I shouldn't worry about others getting glory or even doing better at some aspects of the job that I am. Actually, that's a credit to me. That says
Correct.
I'm a good leader. If I've chosen and trained people who actually excel, then that means our ministry can expand far beyond the limits of one person.
Yeah. So good. And I would say, to me, such a healthy reminder for me that in those times where we are tempted, because I think every leader is tempted
Sure.
with well, it'd just be quicker if I did it.
Right.
But if you're willing to slow down, and yes, it'll take a little bit longer, but our culture drives us to get things done faster and faster and faster. Yeah. And really, if we would slow down in the long run, our reach would be so much greater.
Yes. And there are several points to that. First of all, ministry is not just about getting certain tasks done. It's about involving people.
Correct.
Because you're building people.
Yeah.
So yes, you might be the best at a certain task, but that's not your only orientation.
Correct.
And then in the short run, that might be true. So my wife and I started church. We pretty much did everything that had to be done.
It had to be.
And so we would start Sunday school. She would teach the children. I would teach the adults. We would transition to worship. She would play the keyboard. I would lead the worship. And then I would preach. And then when I would give an altar appeal, she would play the music. I would pray with people in the altar. And I would see a visitor who came in late that I didn't get to meet, and they're walking out the door, so I rushed back to meet them. I rushed back to the altar to pray with the seekers, and they all quit, of course, after I left. But that's not sustainable. Correct. And so my wife was the first music director. She was the first ladies director. But what our goal was, very intentionally, we're going to try to work ourselves out of as many jobs as possible. So we're going to train musicians and turn it over to them. My wife could still be a participant and an advisor, but she's not going to be the music director. Now, I'm not saying someone couldn't be. I'm just saying our mentality was we're trying to. So my wife built up the ladies' ministry, but we turned it over to a qualified woman, and my wife could be the advisor. Not so she wouldn't have anything to do, but so we could go to the next cutting edge ministry that we're trying to establish. So the idea was, as the pastor, especially the founding pastor, the senior pastor, I will try to stay on the cutting edge of expanding the ministry of the church. But to do that, I have to keep giving task off to somebody else.
Right.
And so that's the idea behind it all.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about here often is coach the next level up so that you can be released to do the thing that God is actually calling you to do. Because there are so many faithful people that say, I'll do that, but we know that may not be the thing that God is calling them, or the burden or the desire of their heart. And so I always say, before Elijah ever gets to take a chariot ride, he's got to train Elisha. Right. And so that's what we're trying to do. I want to take my next ride, so I need to invest in those people. So thank you. Last question, and then we're going to wrap this up.
Okay.
If you had an hour of discretionary time, you could do whatever you wanted. Let's do this. Let's make it a day. If you had a whole day and you could do anything you wanted, you had spent the appropriate quality, quantitative time with the family, all those things, what would you do with that day?
Well, I'd do several different things, but I'll tell you what I do.
Yeah.
I like to swim when it's the summertime. So, and that would involve sitting in the sun and reading and swimming. So that would be an ideal day.
I love it.
Another ideal day would be walking in the woods, or meadows or outdoors. I love being outdoors, taking pictures of wildflowers or birds. And the reason why I like to do that, it gets me in nature, which is very soothing, relaxing, enjoyable. It gets me away from people, from phones, and it requires attention. So if I'm trying to get the best shot of that wildflower or that bird and trying to identify what it is, I can't be worrying about problems or work. I can't be mentally rehearsing what I should be doing. I have to be intentionally focused on that moment. Yeah. And so the combination of being in nature and having to be intensely focused is very relaxing to my mind. So those are a couple of things. Now, if we're somewhere, a new city or a new country where I'm ministering, then I love to take a day or two with my wife and go exploring, go walking down the streets, visiting historical, cultural places or scenic places, taking pictures.
I love
so
it.
that is another very relaxing thing when we have an extra day.
I love
And we'll also build an extra day. If we're going for a week for ministry, we'll try to build in an extra day for sightseeing or new experiences.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you for joining us here on the podcast. Appreciate it. And your voice is very powerful in this generation. As I said when we began, very impactful in my life. And so here, let me say thank you for everything that you do. It's very appreciated.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate churches and pastors like you. That's the heart of our movement.
Well, thank you. To all of you, thank you for joining with us today. Remember, God has purposed more for you than you even have imagined, but it begins with your pursuit. And so don't ever stop pursuing. Continue, as you heard today, stay in your disciplines. If you've got off track, just start again. Let's go. And let's see what God's going to do in our lives together. So thank you for joining us on the pursuit. We'll look forward to connecting again next time. God bless.